The morning my husband first smiled at my best friend. I did not think anything of it. That is the part that hurts me now. I saw it happen right in front of me, and still I told my heart to stay quiet. My name is Anna. I am 21 years old. I was raised in a small Amish settlement in Pennsylvania, where the fields are wide, the roads are quiet, and everyone knows your family before they know your name. My life was never big. It was chores, church, family, sewing, baking, and trying to be the kind of woman my mother said a wife should be. Quiet, patient, useful, faithful. I tried to be all those things, but no one taught me what to do when my husband's heart began leaving me while he still sat at my table every night. My husband's name was Eli. He was not a cruel man. That is important to say. He did not shout at me. He did not shame me in front of others. He did not come home smelling of trouble or anger. He was gentle, maybe too gentle. He kept his feelings buried so deep that even I, his wife, could not always reach them. When we first married, I believed his quietness meant peace. I believed his soft voice meant kindness. I believed our home would grow warm with time. But sometimes a quiet house is not peaceful. Sometimes it is only lonely. We had been married almost 9 months when everything began to change. It was during harvest season. The days were long. The air smelled of dry corn, apples, horse sweat, and wood smoke from early morning fires. Every family was busy. Men worked in fields, women canned food, washed clothes, packed meals, and helped wherever extra hands were needed. That was when my best friend Miriam began coming to our home more often. Miriam and I had known each other since we were little girls. We learned to sew on the same bench. We sat beside each other during church services. We whispered worries to each other while washing jars after canning days. She knew things about me no one else knew. She knew I was afraid of being a poor wife. She knew I sometimes cried quietly after Eli fell asleep. She knew I wanted a baby, but month after month, nothing happened. And she knew I was ashamed of how lonely marriage felt. That is why I trusted her, maybe too much. Miriam was different from me. I was careful with my words. She was warm. I held my feelings inside. She spoke softly but easily. When she entered a room, people relaxed. Children liked her. Older women trusted her. Men listened when she spoke, though she never tried to draw attention. She was not loud. She was not vain. That made it harder for me to see the danger. If she had been proud or careless, maybe I would have noticed sooner. But Miriam was good. At least, I believed she was. The first day she came to help, I was making apple butter in the kitchen. The fire was hot. My arms ached from stirring. Miriam arrived with her sleeves rolled and her bonnet tied neatly under her chin. "Anna," she said, smiling, "you look near ready to fall over." I laughed because she was right. Eli came in from the barn just then, wiping his hands on a cloth. Miriam looked over and said, "You should be ashamed, Eli, letting your wife work herself thin." She said it gently, almost teasing. Eli smiled, a real smile. Not the small, polite one he gave at church, not the tired one he gave me at supper, a real one. I remember feeling happy at first. I thought, good. He is laughing. The house needs laughter. I did not know that one small smile would become the first loose thread in my marriage. After that day, Miriam came often. Sometimes she helped me can peaches. Sometimes she helped mend shirts. Sometimes she brought bread for us because she said I looked tired. I did not ask why she noticed my tiredness more than Eli did. I only felt grateful. In the evenings, the three of us would sit in the kitchen. The lamp flame would move softly. The walls would glow yellow. Outside, horses shifted in the dark barn. Inside, Miriam would talk about small things. A neighbor's new calf, a crooked quilt square, a child who dropped a whole basket of eggs. Eli would listen. Then he would answer. more than he answered me. That was the first thing I truly noticed. With me, Eli was quiet. With Miriam, he seemed lighter. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself Miriam simply knew how to speak to him. I told myself a wife should not be jealous of her best friend. Jealousy was ugly. Jealousy was sinful. Jealousy could ruin a woman from the inside, so I prayed against it. At night, after Eli slept, I would lie awake and whisper, "Lord, make my heart clean." But my heart was not the only thing troubled. My home was changing, and I could feel it. One Sunday after church, families gathered outside near the wagons and buggies. The service had been held at Bishop Amos's farm that morning. The women had prepared food. The men stood in small groups talking about weather and crops. Children ran near the fence until their mothers called them back. I was helping carry dishes when I saw Eli and Miriam standing near the water pump. They were not touching. They were not doing anything shameful. But they were standing close enough that their voices were only for each other. Miriam said something. Eli looked down and smiled. Then he looked at her with a softness I had been begging to see in his eyes for months. My hands tightened around the dish I was holding. For the first time, the fear inside me had a name. Not betrayal, not yet, but closeness. A closeness that did not belong to me. That evening, I asked Eli if something was wrong between us. He looked surprised. "No," he said. "Only that." No. I waited. I hoped he would ask why. I hoped he would reach for my hand. I hoped he would say, "Anna, you are my wife, and I see you." But he only went back to oiling his work boots. I stood there feeling foolish, so I said nothing more. Days passed. Then one afternoon, rain came hard over the fields. The sky turned dark, though it was still early. I had gone to the sewing room to fold cloth. When I came back toward the kitchen, I heard voices. Eli and Miriam. They did not know I was near. Miriam's voice was soft. "You should tell Anna you are unhappy." My breath caught. Eli answered, "She has done nothing wrong." There was silence. Then Miriam said, "That does not mean you are happy." I stood behind the door, with my heart beating so loudly I thought they would hear it. Eli spoke again. "I do not know what I feel anymore." Those words stayed inside me like a stone. I stepped back before they could see me. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were cold. My eyes burned. My husband had feelings he could speak to Miriam, but not to me. That night, I watched him across the table. He ate the stew I had made. He thanked me softly. He looked tired, normal. But I was not normal anymore. Something had opened inside me. A fear, a question, a wound. And once it opened, I could not close it again. Because I knew now that the danger was not only in what Eli felt for Miriam, it was also in what he no longer felt for me. The next morning, I found a folded piece of blue quilt cloth on the kitchen bench. It was Miriam's. I knew because I had seen her sewing it. But tucked inside the fold was something else. Not a letter, not a photograph, just a small pressed wildflower. The kind that grew near the lane behind our house. The same lane where Eli often walked after supper when he said he needed air. I held that little flower in my palm. And suddenly, I knew. My best friend was keeping memories from my husband, and my husband was giving her reasons to keep them. I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at that tiny wildflower. It looked harmless. Just a small purple flower pressed between two pieces of cloth, but my stomach felt sick, because deep inside, I already knew it meant something. People do not save things without a reason, especially not memories. I slipped the flower back inside the folded cloth. Then I placed it exactly where I had found it. I did not want anyone knowing I had seen it. Not yet. I needed answers first, real answers, not guesses, not fears, not the terrible stories my mind was already creating. For the next few days, I watched. I hated doing it. Miriam was my best friend. Eli was my husband. I should not have needed to watch either of them, but I did, and what I saw slowly broke my heart. The signs were small, always small. That was what made them so dangerous. If they had done something obvious, maybe I could have confronted them immediately. Instead, it was little things, tiny things, a glance, a smile, a joke shared between them, moments that seemed innocent unless you saw all of them together. Then they formed a picture, and the picture was becoming harder to ignore. One afternoon, several women gathered at our house for a quilting day. The long quilt frame filled most of the room. Needles moved, fabric shifted. Women talked quietly while their hands worked. I sat beside Miriam, just like I had 100 times before. But everything felt different now. Every smile she gave me felt heavy. Every kind word felt strange, because I kept wondering, was she hiding something from me? Or was I imagining everything? At one point, someone mentioned marriage. An older woman laughed and said, "A good husband is a blessing from God." Most women nodded. Then another woman asked Miriam if she ever hoped to marry soon. Miriam smiled, but it was a sad smile, a complicated smile, the kind that appears when someone is carrying a secret. "I suppose God has his own plans," she said softly. Then she lowered her eyes. For some reason, that answer frightened me. That night, I could not sleep. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The house was dark. Eli slept beside me, his breathing slow and steady. I stared at the ceiling. Questions filled my mind. Did he love her? Did she love him? How long had this been happening? And the question that hurt the most, had he ever truly loved me? The next morning, I made a decision. I would speak to Miriam, not accuse her, not attack her, just ask, woman to woman, friend to friend. 2 days later, I found her alone near her father's barn. She was hanging washed clothes on a line. The wind moved the sheets gently. For a moment, I almost turned around. I almost walked away. But I forced myself forward. "Can we talk?" I asked. She looked surprised. Then she nodded. "Of course." We sat on 2 wooden crates near the barn wall. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question, "Miriam, are you unhappy?" She looked confused. "Why would you ask that?" I swallowed hard. "Because lately you seem sad." She stared down at her hands, and for the first time, I saw tears gathering in her eyes. My heart began pounding. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she whispered. The moment those words left her mouth, I felt cold. I knew. Before she said another word, I knew. "Miriam," her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." I felt my chest tighten. "What happened?" She covered her face, and then she started crying. Not quietly, not politely. She cried like someone carrying a burden too heavy to hold anymore. For several minutes, she could barely speak. Finally, she looked at me. I tried staying away. Those words felt like a knife. I closed my eyes, because now there was no misunderstanding, no confusion, no innocent explanation. "Do you love him?" I asked. She immediately shook her head, then stopped, then started crying again. That answer told me everything. Because people only struggle that hard when the truth hurts. "I never planned this," she whispered. "He is your husband." I felt tears forming in my own eyes. "Then why?" She shook her head. "I do not know." But I think she did know. She simply could not say it. Finally, she looked directly at me. "Anna, He talks to me. I stared at her. She continued. He tells me what he is afraid of. He tells me about his worries. He tells me about his dreams. He tells me things he says he cannot tell anyone else. Those words hit me harder than any confession, because there was no mention of stolen kisses, no mention of secret meetings, no mention of physical betrayal. The wound was deeper. It was emotional. My husband had given another woman the part of himself he never shared with me. I stood up. I could not sit there anymore. The pain was too much. Miriam stood too. Tears rolled down her face. I am sorry. I nodded slowly, but I could not answer, because I did not know what to say. That evening, I confronted Eli. For the first time since our marriage, I refused to stay silent. We sat at the kitchen table after supper. The lamp burned between us. Outside, darkness covered the farm. Inside, my heart felt like it might explode. Do you love Miriam? The question filled the room. Eli froze, completely froze, and that silence gave me my answer before he even spoke. Finally, he lowered his head. I do not know. The words shattered me, because a husband should know. A husband should never have to wonder. Tears ran down my face. What about me? His eyes filled with sadness, real sadness, and somehow that hurt even more, because I could see he did not want to hurt me, yet he was hurting me anyway. You are a good wife, Anna. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because those words sounded so empty. A good wife, that was all. Not loved, not cherished, not wanted, just good. For months, I had been working harder, praying harder, trying harder, believing the problem was me, believing if I became a better wife, everything would improve. But sitting there that night, I finally understood the truth. This was never about bread, or laundry, or chores, or being a good wife. It was about something neither of us knew how to fix. Then Eli said something that surprised me, something I never expected. I think I have been unhappy for a long time. I stared at him. He continued, I do not know why. Those words sounded honest, painfully honest. He was not running toward Miriam because she was perfect. He was running toward the feeling she gave him. The feeling of being understood, the feeling of being seen, and somewhere along the way, our marriage had lost that. The church leaders became involved shortly afterward, not because of scandal, not because anyone had been caught doing something improper, but because everyone could see something was wrong. Meetings began, prayers began, counseling began. People hoped the marriage could be saved. I hoped so too, even after everything, because I still loved him. Then one evening, something happened that changed everything. I returned home earlier than expected from helping my mother. As I walked through the orchard behind our house, I saw two figures sitting beneath an old apple tree, Eli and Miriam. They were not touching, not even close, yet they looked completely alone in their own world, talking quietly, sharing something, a connection, a closeness, something that should have belonged to a husband and wife. I stood there watching, and for the first time, I realized the truth. The greatest danger was not that my husband loved my best friend. The greatest danger was that my best friend loved him back. And judging by the tears on Miriam's face that evening, they had already made a decision neither of them had told me yet. I stood among the apple trees. Neither Eli nor Miriam saw me. The evening sun was low. The orchard was quiet except for birds settling into the branches. I should have walked toward them. I should have demanded answers. But I did not. Instead, I turned around and walked away, slowly, silently, because deep inside, I already knew. Whatever decision they had made, my heart was not going to like it. That night was one of the longest nights of my life. I sat beside the kitchen window long after Eli went to bed. The lamp burned low. The house felt empty, even though another person was inside it. I kept thinking about the girl I used to be, the girl who dreamed about marriage, the girl who believed love would solve loneliness, the girl who thought being a good wife would guarantee happiness. I wanted to reach back through time and hug her, because she had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Eli asked if we could talk. The moment he said those words, my stomach tightened. People only ask for serious conversations when serious things are about to happen. We sat at the table together, the same table where we had eaten hundreds of meals, the same table where we had prayed together, the same table where I had cried more than once when nobody was looking. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Eli finally looked at me. His eyes were tired, very tired, like a man who had not slept well in weeks. Maybe he had not. "Anna," his voice cracked. That frightened me more than anything, because Eli almost never showed emotion. "I do not want to hurt you." Tears immediately filled my eyes, because every painful conversation seems to begin that way. "I know." He lowered his head. Then he said the words I had been fearing. "I think our marriage is broken." The room became silent, so silent that I could hear the clock ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Each second felt heavy. I wanted to argue. I wanted to remind him of our wedding, our promises, our faith, everything we had built. But another part of me was exhausted. Exhausted from pretending, exhausted from hoping, exhausted from fighting a battle I could not win alone. So I asked one question: "Do you love her?" Eli closed his eyes, and slowly, he nodded. That was it. No dramatic confession, no shouting, no scandal, just one small movement of his head, and my marriage ended. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but strangely, I did not feel surprised, only sad, very sad, because I had known for a long time. I just had not wanted to admit it. A few days later, Miriam came to see me. She looked miserable. Her eyes were red from crying. Her face was pale. For a moment, she looked like the little girl I had grown up with, not the woman who had become the center of my heartbreak. "I am leaving," she said. I blinked. "What?" She nodded. "I am moving to another settlement." I stared at her. That was not what I expected. Not at all. She sat across from me. Tears filled her eyes. "I cannot stay here." "Why?" Her voice broke. "Because every time I see you, I remember what I have done." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered something I never expected. "I never wanted him to choose me." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw someone hurting almost as much as I was. That did not erase what happened. It did not make everything okay, but it reminded me of something important. Pain creates victims in different ways. Miriam had lost her best friend, Eli had lost his marriage, and I had lost both. The church leaders eventually made their decision. Eli and I separated. It was painful. It was embarrassing. People talked. Of course they talked. Small communities always talk. But something surprising happened during those months. Something I never expected. I started finding myself again. For so long, my entire identity had been tied to being a wife, a good wife, a faithful wife, a hardworking wife. When that role disappeared, I felt lost. But slowly, very slowly, I discovered there was more to me than marriage. I spent more time helping my mother. I joined sewing gatherings again. I laughed with friends. I worked in the garden. I read scripture. I prayed. Not prayers asking God to fix my marriage. Those prayers were gone. Instead, I prayed for peace. And little by little, peace arrived. One spring morning, nearly a year later, I was hanging laundry outside. The sky was bright blue. The fields were turning green again. Birds sang from nearby trees. It felt like the world was waking up after a long winter. As I pinned a sheet to the line, I suddenly realized something. I had not cried in weeks, not because I had forgotten, not because it no longer hurt, but because the pain no longer controlled me. That realization felt like freedom, quiet freedom, the kind that arrives slowly, the kind that sneaks into your heart without announcing itself. Later that summer, I received a letter from Miriam. She was living in another Amish settlement. She wrote that she had never married Eli. In fact, she had stopped writing to him entirely. I stared at that sentence for a long time, because for months I had believed they would end up together. I believed that was the reason I lost everything. But life had chosen a different path. According to her letter, they had both realized something. The feelings that grew between them had come during a season of loneliness, a season of confusion, a season when neither of them was thinking clearly. That truth did not erase the damage, but it explained some of it. Eli eventually moved away too. I heard updates occasionally, nothing detailed, nothing important. Just enough to know he was alive and working. Years later, when I think back on that season of my life, one lesson stands above all others. Love cannot survive where honesty is missing. Eli never told me how unhappy he was. I never told him how lonely I felt. Miriam never told me she was struggling with feelings she did not understand. We all stayed silent, and silence slowly built a wall between us. By the time anyone finally spoke the truth, the damage was already done. If I could tell young wives one thing, it would be this: do not wait until your heart feels empty before speaking. Do not assume people know what you need. Do not hide loneliness behind a smile. Because sometimes the greatest danger to a marriage is not hatred, it is distance. Small distances, quiet distances, distances that grow one day at a time until two people no longer know how to find each other. I never got the life I imagined when I married Eli. That dream ended, but my story did not. And looking back now, I do not remember the betrayal first. I remember the lesson that healing is possible. The lesson that your worth does not depend on whether someone chooses you, and the lesson that even after heartbreak, God can still lead you toward peace. My husband fell in love with my best friend. That part is true, but that is not the whole story. The whole story is that I survived it, and in the end, that mattered more.